of those people who devote their lives to helping other people. You want to check that they're comfortable. You want to check that they're fine. You get that the world is unjust and unequal. And you do everything you can to make it better. One of the questions, well, that was me for a while. And one of the questions that people often ask me is, Rita, isn't social justice just a fancy word, the latest fancy word for helping people? Like, isn't it just the new buzzword? How can you tell what's social justice and what isn't? Well, let's talk about it. I'll start with a story. It's a story called The River Babies. They say that once upon a time ago, there was a village, and there were two people by a river just hanging out. And suddenly a baby is in the river coming downstream. The first person gets alarmed, a helper, and says, hey, let me run, let me go get the baby. And that first person goes, gets the baby, brings the baby to the village, calls the other villagers and says, hey, we have to look after this baby. The next day, the two people are by the river again. And that day, two babies come down the river. So together this time, they both get to work and pull the babies out of the river. Now, you got the nick of it. Like, in the next days, more babies come down the river. More and more and more. And so the villagers set up a whole operation. They find ways to feed the babies and to clothe the babies, and the babies become part of this community. Honorable, right? Well, one day, one of the villagers gets to the side of the river and finally walks away. Says, I'm done. I'm not pulling babies out of the river anymore. And the villagers are shocked. How dare you? How dare you not pull babies out of the river? Don't you see we need you? Don't you see that there's so much work to do? Can't you see how much work there is to feed these babies and to clothe these babies? How dare you not contribute? How dare you not come? And this villager says, I'm going up the river to find out what is happening, why so many babies are in the river. My take, if you're not going upstream to find out why there are so many babies coming down the river, I don't think you're doing social justice work. Social justice work requires going upstream. Now, many of us have the analysis. We've read enough books. We know what's going on upstream. So to me, it's not only about knowing what's going on upstream, it's making an active effort to change some of what's going on upstream. So if you're the kind of person who has been looking after babies downriver, downstream, for a good part of your life, and you're getting tired and exhausted, and you're really ready to go upstream to make a difference and stop babies coming down to begin with, I have a few tips for you. I'm Dr. Rita. I'm a social justice consultant and coach, and I know what you want. You want to feel a sense of purpose, a sense of leaving a legacy behind, not only in the number of babies you're taking care of, but you want to work yourself out of a job. You want to make sure that the babies stop coming down the river. You want to make sure that human capital isn't wasted, that people aren't wasted, that intelligence isn't wasted, that lives aren't wasted. So here are 3 ways you can go upstream. First, look at the bigger picture. Look for the obstacles in what you're dealing with. And I would say first, look for obstacles in practices. Practices generally get revealed when you try to do something outside of the norm. And people push back with, well, that's how we've always done it around here. Or people push back a little bit more forcefully and say, that's the way we do it around here. The hint is that people are saying there's no other way to do it, or if there is another way to do it, we're not interested in trying because our way is the only way. Generally, when people get that kind of pushback, it's because the practice is not in writing. It's actually in the habit. So, in the analogy of the babies down the river, it's the person who says to the other, how dare you put your attention out somewhere else? What we do here, what we do in this village, is we expect you to pay attention to what's happening downstream. We expect you to ignore what's going upstream. And I've seen many nonprofits and many organizations that claim to be for justice that are really ignoring what goes upstream. And if you start paying attention to what goes upstream or you start mentioning what's going upstream, you may get ostracized. So what do you do in that case? Here's tip number 2. Look at legislation. Look at legislation that is keeping people from going upstream. Pay attention, not just to the practice, which is how we do things around here, but what are the actual restraints that are keeping people so busy downstream that they can't look upstream? Is it that you're funding in 6-week or 2-month cycles? So you're constantly putting in new proposals, and putting in new proposals takes up so much of your time that you don't have time anywhere else? Is it that your funder requires 50, hundreds of pages of paperwork, and then most of your time is going into paperwork instead of going into the people that you're trying to serve? Or is there actually a law that forbids, in the name of something noble, like anti-corruption or anti-competition, that actually forbids you to talk to other people in the same funding stream that got the kind of funding that you got or that are doing the kind of work that you do? Pay attention to what is forbidden. Pay attention to what laws and practices are in place that keep your attention downstream instead of going upstream. And here we go. Number 3, systems never change through individual effort. Systems are born from groups of people and movements of people. And just like they are born from groups of people, they get shifted because of interest groups shift. So in the case in which you and your work practices are mainly about focusing downstream and you're interested in looking upstream, but you have a set of practices and laws that keep you from paying attention upstream, the next thing to do is create connections. Don't go at it alone. Don't try to change the law or the practice alone. You're just going to burn yourself out and invest a ridiculous amount of efforts. Don't do that. Try to find out who is in the same situation you're in. Who else is being blocked from going upstream? Who else is paying attention downstream? And start networking fiercely with other organizations. Maybe it's other nonprofits in your area. Maybe it's some movement builders. Maybe it's some activist organizations. Maybe there are membership organizations. Start paying attention to the other people who are working downstream. Network with organizations and start asking within those organizations, who else is tired of working downstream? So in this tail analogy that we started off with, find out, instead of going straight upstream by yourself, maybe go, scope it out, come back down. But before you decide to challenge your whole village about needing to not work downstream anymore, find out who in the village, who in the other people who are working downstream are tired. Who else has your same deep yearning to go upstream? Who else is intrigued and maybe mad and frustrated about the whole downstream thing? who else is really invested in changing laws and practices, and who can see beyond that small picture into what's possible in a bigger and stronger way? Those are your people. Go find them, organize with them. I'm Dr. Rita, and that's it. Until the next time, that's the difference for me between social justice and helpers. And my wish is that we have as many social justice people and as many people as possible going upstream, that what becomes possible is us reorganizing our whole society, no longer around fear and inequality, but around regenerative solidarity. What would a world organized around solidarity look like? What would it look like to have every human being valued equally? I believe we can create a society like that. And I believe that comes from going upstream, to finding out the origin of inequality and going at it together. I know there are lots of people who are already doing it. Maybe it's ready. You're ready too.